Hello, Soden Bowl, and welcome to our second edition of Shank and Kylo's Madden 20 podcast. Um, all right, so let's get right to it here. First off, let's start off with who we picked and why. Shanks, we'll start with you.
Man, I think you look at the top, 15 picks or so of the draft, and I think Alpha touched on it during the team draft broadcast. A lot of guys just pick their favorite teams. He talked about, when guys have a team they enjoy playing with, they stick around longer. And so when the pick came up, I think me and you talked a little bit about it before we went on the air. There were some intriguing options there at 12, but at the end of the day, I went the homer route and picked the Panthers.
So interesting. You said there was a few options there. Who else were you? I know we mentioned before you were considering the Redskins because we had talked about that in our last podcast. But who else were you considering?
So 12 comes up, and I think a lot of us anticipated the Cardinals would go relatively early. You have Kyler Murray. I think across the board, they probably had the highest rated draft class. So when they fell out of the top 10 and were sitting there at 12, uh, there was definitely a lot of consideration that went into them. The Redskins were another team. I think that Dwayne Haskins is the most NFL ready quarterback when you talk about throw power, throw accuracy.
Right.
I think he's probably the best pocket passer available as a rookie. Uh, and then, like you were talking about, you got some young pieces on defense. And then your backfield with Darius Geis and Bryce Love provides you some options down the road on running the football as well.
Definitely, even to have Adrian Peterson there to change it up too, who probably still have a will have a decent rating there. All right, so then I picked the Jaguars, which I know probably might have stunned some people. Um, so as everybody knows, I was diehard Eagles, but upon talking to Colids and stuff, and he wanted to go to Cowboys, and I hate everything about the Cowboys, and I didn't want to just hate him for being the Cowboys because that's how much I don't like them. So I decided to not go as my Eagles and instead went with the Jaguars. For anybody can figure it out by now, for Nick Foles mostly, but also because they do have some good pieces. They have a really young, mostly young defense with a lot of still solid pieces there. Um, and they have Fournette. We'll see how he gets rated. And they have some wide receivers. We'll see how they get rated. But Nick Foles should be low 80s, and that's very workable. And that's, I mean, it's Nick Foles, so I'll enjoy using him regardless. But yeah, I'm excited to use this Jaguars team. We'll see if I regret the Eagles. I was also considering the Cardinals. I think everybody who didn't pick the Cardinals was probably considering the Cardinals just for Kyler Murray. I was considering them and the Ravens too. If for some reason I didn't get the Eagles or Jags, fall to me. But yeah. All right. So
So I
let's
think
go ahead.
just to talk about your pick, we talked the day of the draft about the Jags, and I think that one thing that the Jaguars offer you, in our first edition of the podcast, we talked about the Chargers and Philip Rivers, and we talked about, there are some teams who don't have solidified options at the quarterback position, or you have an older quarterback that you're eventually going to have to replace. I think the thing that really benefits you with the Jaguars is Nick Foles was never the long-term answer. So I think it gives you some flexibility as far as moving towards that first off season, and potentially grabbing another quarterback or drafting one, and letting him sit and develop him. So, man, I think as long as everything works out for you on the 15th and gives you some weapons, you should be good for a long time.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's what I was thinking too. I was also thinking, well, if Nick Foles rates out well, he does have a contract that kind of brings him a couple years, so I don't have to rush to get a quarterback the next draft either, like some of the other teams they're gonna have to do next offseason. So I kind of have a lot of options at quarterback position. And again, defense is really important in every Madden, so I kind of wanted to emphasize that. And I know the Eagles will still have a good defense too, but just kind of wanted to mix it up and go Jaguars.
I like it, man.
All right, so let's get right into whoever everybody else picked. One sec, let me set everything up here. All right, so I have the list pulled up here. Everybody can read it. I don't need to read it off to you, but let's start with who were most surprised about. Shanks, do you have anybody in mind who you were surprised they picked?
You know, JMO really surprised me at the top. I didn't think that um, Hoyt was going to have to worry. He had talked for a long time. Hey, if my Packers are there, I'm going to take them. Um, and I honestly didn't expect him to have an issue getting them to fall. Uh, and then JMO, I'd had a couple conversations with him and never really got an indication from him, excuse me, where he was leaning.
Uh-huh.
So when he pops up and picks the Packers, man, that one was the one that I really thought. Um,
You were surprised by, yeah.
yeah, I thought for sure that Hoyt was picking at 15. That's pretty much right in the middle of the draft, and I couldn't honestly didn't think that the Packers would go top 10.
I wouldn't have guessed it either, just because of Aaron Rodgers being up there in age, and he will be dynamic and have an X factor. But this they don't have a whole lot of pieces outside of Aaron Rodgers, offensively and stuff. They got an aging Randall Cobb and stuff. So yeah, I was definitely surprised to see them go so high. And again, I know T Hoyt was looking at the Packers too. So I was just surprised that it went to JMO. Have you had a chance to speak to JMO afterwards, after the draft, and see
No,
what happened?
no, but I knew that he was one of those guys that when you first talked to him after the team draft order got released, I think he started with maybe like 10 or 12 teams that he honestly considered. So he obviously saw something, whether it was the rookie ratings or something that got his attention that got him to in my opinion, reach.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it definitely was a little bit of a reach, but maybe he really liked somebody, and maybe he was just kind of feeling it, and that's kind of what happened with me and the Jaguars pick. There's no way if I needed to pick the Jaguars there at 5, they were probably going to be there by 20, maybe more than that. But if you want the team you want, just take them. Kind of, I guess, if you want to compare it to a Giants Daniel Jones pick, if you want to do that, but probably not. It's a little different than that. But yeah,
So that's honestly who I thought. Speaking on JMO, that's who I thought he was going to take. I thought he was going to pick the Giants
really, I thought you
because
picked the
Daniel
Giants.
Jones is a kind of a detraction there. You don't want to take him because your rookie quarterback that your franchise just spent, a top 10 pick on doesn't rate well. But uh, I think that there was some options in the trade market and maybe even free agency once you get through the preseason where you could find a second quarterback. I don't think you necessarily have to be in any rush to replace Eli Manning in year one. Um, so I think that there was some leverage there as far as some pieces that you could maybe move to get a quarterback that you desired a little more than Daniel Jones, even if you were just going to let him sit.
Really, who
Uh,
you thinking of? I don't really know. I can't really think of people off the top
so
of my head who would be better option than
I
Eli. To be
think,
honest, as funny as that is.
um, when you talk about flexibility in the offseason, you're even if you keep Daniel Jones and Eli Manning, you're probably going to start Eli year one. But there are some
Oh, true.
intriguing options I think that hit free agency year two. You have an opportunity maybe to get like a Teddy Bridgewater. Um,
True. True.
Tyrod Taylor is there if you want to grab somebody who can
Oof.
bridge the gap.
Big oof.
Um, and you're going to have guys who drafted young quarterbacks who decide, hey, I'm going to throw these guys to the fire. Washington and Dwayne Haskins, the Broncos and Drew Lock. Kyler Murray's absolutely going to start in Arizona. So you have some veteran pieces who you can reach out and say, you know what, Case Keenum's a better option than Daniel Jones. Uh, some There are going to be some pieces that get moved, I think, early.
Yeah, I see your point,
Uh,
but at the same time, I guess Case Keenum probably wasn't the best example because I know where you're going with that. More like a Bridgewater thing, or maybe if Foles doesn't work out for me, I drop him or something, that kind of thing. But do you really want to be in that position after year one to have to draft another quarterback or to look for an aging veteran?
yeah, I just don't think, because I considered the Giants, they were one of my probably top 4 or 5 teams that I looked at just because I think offensively Saquon can do so much that you there's not a ton of pressure on your quarterback. A defense isn't going to be focused on Golden Tate and Sterling Shepard and Evan Ingram, your defense's entire week in and week out, its entire focal point is going to be Saquon.
That's
So
true.
I think
Yeah.
that having a back like that takes so much pressure off of your passing game, uh, that there's not, in that situation, I don't think you absolutely need somebody that's a surefire, Pro Bowler to get the job done. I
True.
think that
So that's why I
you
guess
can
you see what
take
you're
one of
saying,
those.
where like Eli would work for year one, and then you go with somebody else who's an upgrade a veteran quarterback who's an upgrade would be totally fine, or take a chance on a flyer in the draft would be also fine. Have Daniel Jones back up somebody like that, or maybe Daniel Jones does develop. We don't know what kind of development he'll have. He has a low rating, but maybe sitting behind Eli, and if we implement a rule like we've been discussing, where you have a quarterback sit behind a veteran, they kind of gain XP and rewards and whatnot. So that could have a factor in actually developing Daniel Jones. So yeah, that's a good point there. All right, so moving on a little bit more to some other teams here. What division do you think is going to be the most dangerous, user-wise and team-wise?
So a lot of guys in the chat have talked about the NFC West. A lot of guys have talked about the AFC North in the chat. But I think on the surface, there are three divisions that are really, I think, going to produce multiple playoff teams, and if not a second one, it's going to be because a team got beat up within the division. So the NFC West, you have Hoyt, Soden, Swing, and McBreezy. All of those guys are solid owners.
Definitely, yeah.
Um, Soden's been, up or near the top as long as I've been around. Swing is a phenomenal sim owner. T. Hoyt and McBreezy both have made deep playoff runs in these last couple of seasons. The AFC North has Alpha, who's coming back after a hiatus away from the game, but from all accounts played really well in the beta. Jay Cork is solid. King Booker and Lurk God both put together really tough squads on 19. And then the NFC South, man, Crowd Pleaser is no joke. I've been playing Madden with that guy since the launch of 19. Me and Hoyt brought him over to Soden. He's a phenomenal user, man. He makes adjustments continuously, and the thing about Crowd Pleaser is if you beat him early in the season, especially as a division opponent, and you spent the division with him between the Packers and the Bears, there's a decent chance that the next time you guys meet 4, 5, 6 weeks down the road, you're going to see something totally different from him and his game plan.
Yeah,
Phil is a
definitely.
solid user. Phil plays all his games. He's real big into development and getting young guys an opportunities to succeed. Myself and Carolina, it seems like we don't really know who this Bucks user is going to be, because kylo was kind of in and out. But if we end up replacing him, you take a look at the waitlist, man, and there are some really solid users on that as well. So I think ultimately I'd probably say the NFC West, but there are three divisions at the top who all have the potential to produce at least one guy, if not two, every year that make deep playoff runs.
Definitely. And what I like about how this draft just kind of naturally turned out, it's all pretty evenly spread out here. You can look at the obvious front runner with NFC West because you have T. Hoyt, Soden, and Swing and Breezy, who all have been really top tier players. But you can also look at a division like, even you take out the NFC East. You have Coolodds, who's been playing much better down the stretch in Madden 19, and with the Madden 20 gameplay improvement, I think he'll be better too. Y-Rock, who's been pretty decent, and then you have DP, number one draft pick, who I actually brought in, who I know is going to be phenomenal. He likes his Redskins, so he'll have a lot of interest in that team. So I think he'll be solid, and that'll be a nice division to watch too. Um, yeah, and back to Crowd Pleaser. Yeah, I remember. I mean, I played him the last couple seasons. It's been back and forth between me and him, who can beat the other. I've been lucky enough to get away with a few wins, but every time I had to figure out what he was doing and change up my game plan too, just to, you know, be able to match what he was doing. One week could be short passes and screens and, safer throws. Next week he'd be bombing it past my DBs. So, yeah, he'll be a solid user in that division for sure. You're gonna have your hands full there. All right, so what do you
Is number
think?
one draft pick a Redskins fan?
Yes, he's a Redskins fan and a Capitals fan.
Nice. So he actually, to be relatively low in the draft, he picked what 22nd. He was able to get his favorite team. That's pretty sweet.
Favorite team and probably the best time to pick the Redskins team in a Madden league, in my opinion, at least in the past couple of years.
I agree with that wholly.
All right, so moving on a little bit, who do you think, user-wise, is going to be surprised by their Madden NFL ratings?
Man, that's a tough one because I think when you look at it, you see, a lot of people like to rank NFL teams in tiers. I think the team that really may shock a lot of people, and I think Swing will be pleasantly surprised, is the 49ers. Their defensive line is phenomenal. He gets Jimmy Garoppolo back, who I think realistically probably grades out in the mid 80s. Um,
Mid 80s,
so
really?
I think that Jimmy G, you look at what he was able to do after the trade to San Francisco and how he got those guys rolling. And then last year he gets derailed by a season-ending injury, and I think a lot of people forget how good he was 2 years ago.
Yeah, but we just
And
don't have. That's interesting you say that because I'm gonna have to disagree with you here. I don't think we have enough. We don't have enough material to really see if he's a franchise quarterback. And I think Madden kind of gave him a fair rating last year. They rated him like an 81 overall with like superstar dev, I think. So a lot of potential there that we've seen, but I don't know. I don't think he deserves a high rating right off the bat. I honestly think he goes maybe like a quick or whatever the equivalent is now, maybe star, just above what quick was, not in this Madden, but I think if he goes to like a high 70 overall, like a 78, 79, I wouldn't be surprised. But he'll still be solid. I do agree with the 49ers pick though, just because they have some decent weapons and their defense is definitely going to be a sleeper. I was considering them. They were kind of on the low end of my consideration, but they were definitely a consideration there. After Stone picked the Rams, it was kind of like nah, but they were definitely like 5 on my list.
I think the other thing that people, we talk about players who in real life aren't necessarily as effective as maybe we think they should be. I think Tevin Coleman is a prime example of that in Atlanta the last couple of years. Devontae Freeman's battled injuries, and when he's had opportunities, he's definitely underwhelmed. But Tevin Coleman is also a guy who Madden respects a lot. And that free agent signing goes kind of under the radar because he didn't really produce last year when he had the opportunity.
Yeah,
But I
that's
think it
that's
gives Swain another guy who probably rates out fairly well. In the Madden landscape, man, you get a guy who has decent or even good ball carrier moves or break tackle, and then everybody knows he's got top end speed. So you combine Tevin Coleman with Matt Breida, he's probably going to be hard to stop.
and yeah, I completely agree. I honestly forgot that he had Tevin Coleman. I couldn't think of what the running backs were off the top of my head, but I know I was always in every Madden league I've been in last year. I was trying to get Matt Breida or Tevin Coleman just because of their high end speed and their maneuverability last year. And if they're both on that team, it's going to be a double edged sword that whole year. It's going to be hard to stop both of them. I forgot about that. That's a good point.
Who do you think, though, has the most to gain or to lose on the 15th when these full rosters drop?
To gain or to lose, I think it might have to be to lose. I think it might have to be the Vikings. Um, the Vikings definitely had an off year last year on most accounts. People think maybe about 60% of accounts people don't attribute it all to Kirk Cousins, but it definitely was some degree to Kirk Cousins, and I don't think they kept a lot of their pieces or really made a lot of big moves this offseason because of Cousins' contract. So I think if Cousins doesn't rate out that well, he's getting up there in age. He doesn't rate out that well. He's got that ugly contract situation to deal with if you don't like him. Um, I mean, they do have Dalvin Cook. They had those pieces on offense still, but just the way they weren't able to produce that well last year on offense, especially in the running game, I'm interested to see how well some of those guys get rated on offense.
So an interesting point on Minnesota. So to kind of compare it to the NBA, you look at what the Thunder are doing, and they're fire sailing. I wonder if Waffle House, once he gets in, and you got that Cousins contract, Diggs and Thielen are both going to be big money receivers. Dalvin Cook is slowly approaching the end of that rookie deal. I think you could see a situation where Waffle House decides, I need to start fresh and clear some of this out, and I think you may see some of those guys become available on the market. He doesn't really have the maneuverability with Anthony Barr and some of those defensive pieces because those contracts are so new. But I think that the Vikings are a candidate that if he starts to struggle year one, he could easily say, you know what, I'm going to fire sale these guys. We'll start fresh in the offseason and we'll build this team my way.
True, I think that would be something I could see definitely happening. If I had the Vikings, I would probably be like, okay, well, let's see how this year one goes with this team that I have, but I'm not really in love with it, and I probably would be not opposed to fire selling myself if I had that team. But then you run into the again. I mean, the Kirk Cousins contract and some of the other contracts that they've signed there. Um, it's going to be hard to maneuver, and it'll be interesting to see how well this new Madden, kind of deals with the whole cap situation and the contracts and stuff, just to see how maneuverable that will be. But that's going to be a tough roster, I think, if the ratings don't go their way.
I agree, man.
A roster that I think could be better than expected. I wouldn't be surprised if I know that we've talked about this team a little bit, I think, but the Jets roster, if the Jets, if Sam Darnold gets a little bit of an upgrade from last year, if Le'Veon Bell is right where he's always been, if some of the other receivers they've gotten and have are middle of the pack to better, if Robbie Anderson's where he should be like an 85, 84, Herndon gets an upgrade, their offensive line is really the only problem area here I can see on paper, and with some of the hype that they've generated with their new uniforms and stuff, I could definitely see that team being more highly rated than people are expecting.
I think that's absolutely fair. I think even within that division, a team like Buffalo, honestly, could be another one where, everybody kind of anticipated that they would go relatively high because when you talk about CFM, you talk about quarterbacks and you talk about if you can find yourself in a situation with a younger quarterback that is good enough to start but still needs some development as you go through the cycle, you're probably going to be successful. In reverse live, he gets them. That's his favorite team. He's going to know that roster better than anybody probably. But their defense, man, last year was really good, and I think that there's a chance that some of those younger guys on that defense get a boost. You look at like Tre'Davious White,
Jermaine
uh,
Edwards, yep.
yeah, some of those guys have the potential to get maybe not a significant boost, but a couple of overall points. And I think as you start seeing those younger guys get those upgrades, and he's obviously going to be focus training some of these younger guys, uh, I think that roster has a chance to initially be pretty good, but by the end of season one, especially if he's successful and can do well in that division, I think that the sky may kind of be the limit for them as far as in the AFC East when you look at some of these other rosters.
Yeah, definitely. And then you have the additions that Buffalo did add this year with Cole Beasley and Ed Oliver, the rookie they drafted, who rated pretty well for a rookie. Their sky kind of is the limit because they really don't have a lot of guys who are too far up there in age to deal with. It's kind of just going to be how well does Josh Allen rate and how well is he as a Madden quarterback in this new Madden. Because I know I used him last year and I used him in one of my other leagues, and he is just awful for me as a quarterback to use. He just doesn't seem like he's fast enough to, at least in Madden, be one of those quarterbacks who can run the ball and use the option, but isn't accurate enough to kind of, be okay with that, like a Wentz would be. But it's just gonna have to see how well Josh Allen is able to be played with.
I think Josh Allen, one of the things that may sneak up on people when it comes to his rating is he really is fast. I think he led at least all rookie quarterbacks in rushing yardage. He may have led the entire league in rushing yardage by a quarterback. And I think that's something Reverse was talking about in the chat the other day. It wouldn't surprise me at all the way that we've kind of seen the speed trend in the ratings to see him at like an 86, 87 speed.
Oh yeah,
He's
definitely.
obviously going to
Yeah.
have the huge arm. The other thing about them, though, is there's no big money on that team. There's nobody
Mhm.
on that
Yep.
roster that you're tied to for an extended period of time. And, we talk about Kirk Cousins and the potential cap hit you would have to take to move him. There's no one like that on his roster. So if he can put together a solid year one, get to that first off season, um, and identify the holes that he needs to fill, he should have as much money to spend as anybody as far as upgrading his roster and bringing some guys in.
Yeah, and that's where the Bills didn't go this offseason. They didn't go, full on for a bunch of these free agents. They definitely got some pieces, but they didn't, max out kind of like the Jets did. So I think they're gonna have a lot of leeway. The only real contract I can think of that's kind of big, which isn't even really a factor though, is LaShawn McCoy. But you use him for year one. He gets a little older. You can draft a new running back or throw up Yeldon maybe if he's good at Madden. But yeah, that's a good point for that team.
Yeah, or you wait. You have some guys who, um, the trade market in a CFM is so crucial, because your admin and that approval committee really have to be able to gauge realism, um, the money that's accounted for, the player that's trying to be traded, that kind of stuff. But running back is one of those positions where, not necessarily in recent memory, but you've seen running backs who, I mean, you remember when Trent Richardson blew up with the Browns, and that next
hmm
offseason they traded him to Indy.
Right.
There have been deals over the course of the NFL, in not too recent history that running backs have been moved. So if you're a team like the Bills, who has a lot of cap space to work with and some money they can maneuver, maybe you reach out to one of these teams who may be right there on the bubble and say, hey, man, I'll give you, a second round pick or a late first round pick for your running back. And it's a win-win. It fills a spot for me now that Shady's gone, and you can get some cap relief.
And that kind of
Uh,
ties into what we were talking about with like a team like the Vikings. You have Dalvin Cook, who if that team struggles, he'll still have like a decent rating, or he should still have a decent rating, at least the low 80s. So, and he'll be young, he'll be maneuverable, he'll have a decent contract. So I could definitely see a running back like that being easily moved to a team like Buffalo, who kind of needs it. That's a good point.
right, and you're talking about, when we see players in the NFL get traded, uh, rarely are you going to see a guy who a team has given a max contract to get dealt, because number one, you're going to struggle to find a team that's willing to take on the contract. Most of these guys end up getting cut. But you see, most of the trades you see in the real life in the NFL are guys who are coming into the end of that rookie contract where you're not owed a ton of money by the team. The cap hit to release you is non-existent essentially, or to trade you away. So, we were talking about Dalvin Cook earlier, and how if you're Waffle House, you're going to have to decide, hey, is this my running back of the future? And if not, yeah, I think it's financially easier to move him than probably really any running back that's at least going to hit the market.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really really fair point. All right, so let's move on a little bit to some future Madden news as we kind of wrap this up here. So I just saw a Twitter post that I thought that the Madden 99 Club ratings would be coming out today, but according to the Madden Twitter, they're kind of going to be releasing each one a day, it seems. So a little bit of a killjoy there. I was looking forward to those, but that'll be interesting to see how those shake out. And then next week, the 15th, we'll have all of our rosters handy for us, and everybody can start, discussing trades or potential deals, all that people already have tried to do. But yeah, next week we'll hit some of that, and it'll be a good show. Anything else you'd like to add, Shanks, before we wrap this up?
Man, the one thing I know that me and you kind of talked about off air before we started was, uh, how big the X factor was going to be. And I think there were some teams that went later in the draft who, when we talk about the trade market and we talk about maneuverability, X factors are going to be highly desirable. So if you have an older guy, like for example, the Broncos have Chris Harris Jr. has an X factor. And I know he's a big supporter of Soden Bowl, but if you're the Broncos and you decide to throw Drew Luck to the fire and you struggle year one in a division that has Kansas City, it has a really good Raiders owner, maybe he's a guy that you can recoup a lot of value solely because of that X Factor label. And really, there are a lot of guys who aren't necessarily in their prime who that could apply to. I mean, you have one in Calais Campbell, an older guy with an X Factor. Uh, I think everybody across the league expects you to compete off the bat, but he's a guy that if you need some maneuverability with your cap space, because the Jaguars are going to be in some trouble, he's another guy that I think could get moved along with Earl Thomas. The Ravens, I know they just signed him, but I think it's a 1 year deal in a division that's pretty tough.
Mm.
So I think there are a lot of options as far as older guys that the game gave a lot of credit and credit that was due. But I think that you'll see some of these older guys get moved um, as they build for the future and clear out some of these older guys on the roster. So
Yeah, I think we'll definitely
uh,
see some kind of real. I don't want to say realism, but we'll kind of see kind of some Browns Giants trades that go down that actually mean something. Besides for somebody just wanting the guy who's fast, or somebody just wanting the running back who's a 90 overall for whatever reason. Now there's going to be an actual reason. Maybe that X factor kind of fits into more of their style and stuff. So now those X factors, like you said, are going to be more valuable for numerous reasons. So that's a good point.
and then we talked about the team draft in the 15th and who may or may not be surprised. I think the big thing that sticks out is I think there are 5 teams that don't have an X factor. 6 teams: Titans, Redskins, Lions, Dolphins, Cardinals, Bills. No X factors. But I think when you look at that and you look at the Bills, the Cardinals, the Dolphins, the Lions, the Redskins, and the Titans, all of those are teams that have some flexibility. All of those are teams who have young guys who are still developing, who I think as we get into maybe like year 3 or 4 can develop those X factors.
Definitely.
But I think that that was one of the big things we talked about before the draft was, will guys reach for players? Will guys find an X factor that they enjoyed using in the beta and try to find a team that either had that player or one with a similar X factor? And honestly, I think that the 5 guys or so that set themselves up, that drafted teams that didn't have one, are all teams that really set up nicely for the future.
Yeah, so I don't think anybody's really going to be like disappointed if they don't have an X factor on those teams because they'll have so much talent still, where it's really not going to matter. They'll have talent that's pretty easily upgraded or developed to X factor. You look at the Cardinals and the Titans right off the top of my head. Um, David Johnson, I'm sure. We obviously have Kyler Murray there, but we don't know how the development is going to be. But you look at David Johnson, that guy could be easily. I could see that being a guy who gets maybe 2 or 3 more overall points, and then there you go. He has an X factor. That could be useful. I could see the Titans with Derrick Henry having an X factor, or Jarrell Casey having an X factor soon, or in the near future if they get a few overall points. So
Kevin Byard will
Yep, Kevin
probably get an X
Byard should
factor.
probably and will probably get an X factor in the first 1 or 2 seasons. So all those teams that don't have people are gonna have people soon, I think. So it's a good way it's a good thing that the Madden set it up like that with those veterans having those X factors on the other teams.
I agree, man.
All right, so that about wraps it up here. We'll be back next week, probably Tuesday morning. We'll probably knock this out, or Monday morning. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, all right. Until next time. See you guys later.